I pick them up. So some of the questions you ask when you pick them up is, how was your day? What'd you guys eat? It's normal, right? What'd you guys do for dinner? He's like, oh, we went out for dinner. I'm like, well, where'd you guys go? He's like, they took us to Hooters. This comes out of my son's mouth. I never grew up with faith, but he's seen my kind of walk and he's seen changes in me. So what he says in me is like, it was really weird. I'm like, why? He's like, because it's like a low-key strip club. Yeah, he's 14. I was like, yeah, you're right. And then you know what he said to me?
It's like the devil.
And I was like, well, yeah. So I said, what's very interesting about what you're saying is that there are like sins of the flesh. And it's like, what are they selling? And he's like, yeah, well, they're selling sex. I'm like, yeah, that's a sin of the flesh. And let me explain to you what a sin of the flesh is. He's like, what? I'm like, those chicken wings, do they taste good? He was like, yeah. I'm like, what happens at around 6 or 7 of the chicken wings? It's like my stomach starts to hurt. I said, that's exactly what that is. And I asked him, like, what else was weird? He's like, well, it was weird how the dads were like acting differently. Right? I'm like, yeah. And what I told him is that's a hop, skip, and a jump away from pornography.
It's like a gateway.
It's a gateway to it. And then I had the ability, because I love my dad. He did like the best he could under whatever circumstance, and he didn't have a male figure in his life. But my dad took me to Hooters when I was 12. He took me to a strip club on my 18-year-old birthday. Without him knowing it, he was ushering me into the world of that. So then as a same-sex parent, I'm like, oh, this is how you're supposed to be. This is the way men are supposed to be. This is how you're supposed to behave. But I had the opportunity to have that conversation with Sebastian because he had that exposure. So like, I was grateful that that happened because it encouraged that conversation. And then instead of being like, wah, it's just like, yo, if I could have redone it differently, I would have behaved differently because I would have known something different. But he has the good fortune of perhaps having that awareness at a young age and then making a decision. It was like a mental note, like, okay, you're not hanging out with them anymore.
I mean, I wouldn't even feel comfortable going to a Hooters with anyone.
No, I know. Well,
like, yeah, maybe 10 years ago,
right,
before I was saved, I wouldn't have like, overthought it.
Yeah. And what was interesting is my 14-year-old son had that awareness and none of the adults did. That's fascinating. So what's interesting is he goes to a like a Catholic high school. But that's its first exposure to that. That is relatively new for me. I read the Bible from cover to cover like 18 months ago, started a Bible study. And really, you were part of that because I saw the way that you were living your life. And I was like, bro, what is that? And you said to me on a call, like, I don't know how you, like, I don't know where you are with faith or whatever. But like, you know, here's what I think. I'm like, okay, cool. But then that kind of planted a seed. And when I saw how much money you give away, I don't know anybody who does that. Truthfully. Nobody, independent of how much people make. So I think that what's really cool is that like we are all in a position to be that type of example, because I think the world's example is do good and idolize yourself. His example is do good so you can show people that there's good in the world, which is him. And I'm just a vessel for that. I remember reading Siddhartha, which is a book about the Buddha. He was a prince and his father created a castle for him for each season. So he would go from one place to the next based on the weather. In each castle was everything he needed and wanted. All the food, all the women, all whatever, right? So he never experienced any discomfort. And then he wanders out of, he gets like bored. That's a clue. He gets bored of like the excess. So he wanders outside of the castle one day and he has this right-hand man with him, like servant. And the first thing he sees is like sickness. And he asks the servant, he's like, what's that? He's like, well, that's sickness. He says to him, will that happen to me? He's like, oh yeah, it happens to everybody. They keep walking. Then he sees old age. Never seen it before. What's that? That's old age. Will that happen to me? Yes. Then he sees death. Never seen it before. Will that happen to me? Yes. So what he does is he actually leaves that and he becomes an ascetic. He purges himself of all pleasure, sits in the rain, lets it rain on him, lets bugs bite him, you know what I'm saying? Goes the complete opposite direction. But then he realizes, like, he has this awareness, like, if the guitar string is too tight, it'll break, and if it's too loose, it won't play. Right? So I think we see with contrast. So perhaps it was very advantageous for you to achieve and create the castles in the physical world, because then you recognize what you're looking for wasn't there. Right? Yeah. And that's a weird experience because the world tells you that it's there. But then when you get there, you're like, it's not here. I'm still worried. I'm still afraid. And you're one of the only people that, like, we would sit on calls and do like all this mental heavy lifting. and be like, okay, good, this is what we're gonna do. And he'd be like, hey, by the way, I'm like, what? You're like, none of this really matters to me that much, bro. And I'll be like, what are you talking about, dude? We just spent all this time talking about this. But now I understand what you meant. I didn't when you first said it to me.
It's like that book, The Second Mountain. You know, the first mountain is like achieving, and then the second mountain is helping others
Achieve.
achieve.
Yeah.
So
My experience, which I'm positive is your experience, the second is way more enjoyable and fulfilling.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
That's what's getting me out of social media retirement.
Yeah?
You know, and actually wanting to do it. Like, I wonder how many people I can impact.
Yeah, like how many more people like me can you help?
Yeah.
You know how Drake has that saying, I'm in the building and I'm feeling myself? I was feeling myself. The reason why I was feeling myself is I had finally hit a goal that I had set 5 years before that, which was to do 100 transactions in a calendar year. That's kind of like winning the Super Bowl.